Now you see I've changed into my red jacket, which will be mentioned later on in these segments. But this is made out of silk. It's a Lorraine Torrance design, and it's another wonderful way to show texturization on a completely different fabric. But most of us who are quilters or crafters use cotton because it's the most available fabric that's around, and also we kind of like the patterns and we like working with cotton. So we're going to do a little trunk show just to show you some of the patterns that we've made using Texture Magic. And we'll start with this one. This is called Celebrate. We saw these frogs and they're jumping up and down and just having so much fun.
We couldn't wait to make something with them.
We could not wait.
And of course it had to include Texture Magic.
Right, so we get the idea, okay, so this is where we're going to make Texture Magic part of the quilt by taking different fat quarters of batiks, cutting them in a wedge and placing them around the blocks to make them dance.
And make sure you mention, what Heather did here is took her fat quarter, put the Texture Magic on the back of it, stitched the design, steamed the fabric. She basically created a new fabric, and from that new texturized fabric, she cut out the pieces for her quilt block. From that point on, it was just like making any other quilt.
Correct.
And she also used it here in the little cornerstones, so you can see you've got the great texture there.
So we figured, oh, I love this quilt. And it's called Celebrate, but we're not stuck with just frogs, because sometimes if people don't have little kids in their life, they'd say, why would you use
I can't make that
frogs?
quilt because I don't want to use frogs.
But as a theme quilt, why not make it as a Valentine's quilt?
So you could use it for a seasonal quilt.
Seasonal quilt. Again, now it's for a winter quilt or using Christmas fabric. And what we were delighted about was the fact that once we texturized this fabric, it really did start to look like snow that's being crunchy on the ground. So that was a good one. And then of course, Halloween. Why not make something out of those fabrics that have been hanging out in your cupboard forever?
That's right. It's a great way to use something that has the bigger designs on it too, because you can make that the focus of your block and then add the texture around it. I saw this quilt made in a Halloween version, and for each of the blocks in the quilt she used a different color. So she did red and yellow, green and purple, maybe some red in there too, and it really turned out stunning.
And I like this because it looks like the witch's warty face.
Yes.
Unlike mine.
Unlike yours.
Yes.
So smooth. That's because you've been steaming it with your
steamer. Which we needed to mention. That is an advantage of using steamers. You do not need to go to a spa anymore because it does give you a spa treatment with that steamer.
That's right.
The iron, on the other hand,
not so good.
Not so good.
Not so good. Oh, and in the steamer, actually, there is a little attachment that is actually made for a facial. So, nice to have.
We have not used it. Now we have our next sample of using cotton and a different way of using it in a block. Annie?
And this is a quilt that I made for E.E. Schenck. They sent me the fabric that they wanted to have used, and I looked at it and said, boy, that says a manly, masculine quilt to me. So I wanted to design something that had maybe some geometrics, but also something a little bit different, and I thought the texture would really show up in something curved. I also wanted to try doing something curved. This is a fun quilt to make because you don't do any curved piecing in it. There's a unique way that you put this in, and it's all just regular piecing like you would do, and the instructions of course are in the pattern, but fun, simple, easy to do. And what I did on this quilt was start it with yardage of my batik fabric, again texturized it, and then cut the pieces out for the arcs in the quilt. I called this quilt architecture to take advantage, kind of a little play on words, combining the arcs with the texture that's in those. And this pattern also includes a version for a table runner too. So if you want to make just a few blocks, that's a quick and easy way to make a really unique table runner. We always have fun showing Texture Magic quilts in the booth because you will see people start to walk by the booth and all of a sudden they kind of do a double take and say, how did you do that? And so it's fun to be able to share the magic of texture magic, how fun and easily you can create something really unique in a quilt. Something that makes you do a double take or come in for a much closer look. I'll get this one out of your way and you can show the baby quilts.
I have 3 grandkids.
Beautiful ones.
I have a 5-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a 1-year-old. And when the 1-year-old Evelyn was young, she loved to touch things. And she loved texture. And I noticed that she'd run her hands across rough things, which I was kind of surprised. I thought she'd be repelled by that. But instead, she liked it, and I thought, well, why not incorporate it into a quilt? That way she could have something she could lay on, roll on, and
touch
feel.
as she did. Huh.
Yeah. So we came up with this one. We also came up with this one because it's the first time we were actually using fat quarters, because we wanted to come up with a quilt that was fat quarter friendly. And we also wanted to see what our limit was on how big a piece of texture magic we could put into a quilt before we felt like we had to quilt into it. And we decided that the maximum was 6-inch square. Anything bigger than that, it tends to puff up and not look as good. It's not held down by stitching, which gives it that look. And then a good friend of ours made this pattern and told me, well, if you do your stitching closer, then it holds these folds. And it's these folds that your foot, when you quilt, it'll pick it up and put them back on each other, so instead of looking like a nice texturized piece, it makes it start to look a little messy.
Kind of like you sewed the puckers in?
Yes,
Yeah.
you sewed your puckers in instead. Like
Don't want to
you
sew
didn't
those
mean
puckers
to
in.
do it
Yeah,
on purpose.
right.
So she made this, but she made her stitching closer, and because of it, she made it so that no foot would pick it up and move the fabric around, and she could quilt right into the square, and it looks really, really nice. So that's what we learned since then. But we have this done for a little boy, I suppose, or a girl, it really doesn't matter, but kind of soft fabrics, and then we did it in brighter fabrics, showing it again.
So it has another look. The other thing that we did when we designed this quilt is we wanted to know how much fabric we could texturize with a 1/2 yard of Texture Magic and what we could make from that. So we calculated how much fabric we could do, and then we kind of designed the quilt to use that much texturized fabric. The pattern for this quilt is called Bubbly Babies, and it includes this size as well as a larger one. More of a crib style size, and that one also can be made with 1 package of Texture Magic. For the smaller size like this, you actually have a little bit of Texture Magic left over that you could make a little hootenanny toy or a little Charmer's block or something like that.
Yes, we have decided that's one curse of the Texture Magic. We cannot throw away our scraps no matter how small they are, because we did sew those.
That's right.
And so, we are looking for places to use them.
And these are some ideas that you could do. For instance, when I designed this pattern for baby bibs, I just took a little section. I actually have scraps left from the squares that I texturized for this that I'm going to put into a bib. I didn't get that done yet. But this is just this little portion's texture. Yes, that's the operative word there. Yes. This little ladybug bib has the texturized on the same sides, and again, just a little bit is all you need. So a great way to use your scraps. Or you could do an applique bib with a little lamb or a little chick, and again, just small bits there. You can do a little bit on the shoulder lapels. This is another good example showing how the texture shows up a little bit better on the light colored fabric than on the darker, more patterned fabric of the little lamb. Try different fabrics, try different ones for different effects, and save your scraps. You'll find a good use for them.